Welcome, kindred spirits. You've felt it, haven't you? That subtle pull, that unspoken curiosity surrounding you. People have been obsessed with mysteries forever. Governments spend fortunes trying to figure out things like dark matter and ancient lost cities. But the real puzzles, they're not hidden in a lab or buried in the desert. Sometimes they walk among us, breathing, moving, and stirring things up wherever they go. And lately, all eyes seem to be on you. Whispers travel in the background, questions are asked in boardrooms and quiet corners. How can this person survive what should have destroyed them? How do they seem to know things without being told? Why does their presence shift the whole atmosphere? They struggle to categorize you, and that's what really frustrates the system. Psychologists might throw around words like exceptional intuition. Scientists might try to label it as neurodivergence. Some might even joke that you've been hiding your Hogwarts acceptance letter. But the truth goes way deeper. You're carrying unique powers, and believe me, the investigations are intensifying. It's not just simple curiosity, there's a need to understand. You've become a question mark in their perfect equations. You're like a glitch in their carefully controlled reality, a puzzle that needs solving. And let's be honest, people get deeply unsettled by someone who doesn't play by the predictable rules. So let's get real. No fairy tales, no superhero fantasies. We're diving into the core of what makes you a living, breathing enigma. The powers they're investigating, the forces they can't track or steal, and the reasons you unsettle the crowd and the system built to control it. Because one thing history has taught us: every great mystery once revealed changes the world, and you are about to be revealed. First, your presence reshapes the energy of any room. Instantly. People feel it even if they can't explain it. It's not about being loud or charismatic or trying to grab attention. You might even walk in quietly, hoping to fade into the background. But the moment you enter, something shifts. The air feels different. Conversations pause even for a second. People glance your way without even knowing why. Your presence seems to rearrange the very atmosphere. This is the power they're scrutinizing, and it unnerves people more than you realize. Most people have to work overtime to get noticed. They change their tone, exaggerate their style, or push themselves forward. But you don't need to do any of that. You could stand quietly in a corner, not say a word, and people would still sense you. What they're detecting isn't your appearance or behavior, it's your frequency. You carry an energy signature that's rare, impossible to copy. Call it an aura, a vibe, whatever you want. The point is, they know it's different and they can't control it. This kind of presence exposes people. You're not trying to intimidate, but your energy naturally reveals what's unstable, fake, or uneasy in others. You've probably noticed people either gravitate towards you with admiration, or suddenly become uncomfortable and distance themselves. It isn't random. Your presence is a mirror. For genuine people, it's refreshing. For those hiding something, it's threatening, and they feel it right away. This energy isn't something you put on and take off. It follows you everywhere. Work, family, even among strangers. They might not understand it, but they respond to it. Some are drawn to you without knowing why. Others get defensive as if standing near you challenges something within them. This is why you've been studied, questioned, and doubted. Your presence shatters the illusion that environments are neutral. They are definitely not neutral when you arrive. That's the mystery. You don't just fill a room, you transform it. And deep down, everyone who encounters you knows it. Second, you possess a memory that isn't yours, yet it guides you. This is what leaves people unsettled and fascinated. You move through life with a sense of knowing even about things you've never studied. You choose paths that might not make logical sense, but they always lead you to the right outcome. It's like carrying ancient instructions, whispers in your spirit that tell you where to step, when to pause, and when to move forward. Others rely on trial and error, on years of research and mistakes. But you seem to already carry pieces of the puzzle. That's why they can't figure you out. You seem to be remembering things you were never taught. It's not just intuition, it goes deeper. It's as if your soul holds an archive filled with maps and keys passed down through bloodlines, through spirit, through time itself. Sometimes you can't even explain how you know what you know. You just do. And when you act on it, doors open, traps are avoided, opportunities line up in ways that seem impossible to others. To them it looks like luck. To you it feels like remembering something you never forgot. People investigate this because it challenges how the world explains intelligence. They measure IQ degrees experience, but none of that explains you. You bypass the systems designed to define knowledge, and that makes you dangerous to those who rely on control. You remind them that wisdom isn't just taught. Sometimes it's inherited, carried in silence until it's needed. This memory inside you is why you're often ahead of your time. You see patterns others miss. You sense dangers before they arrive. You even speak truths that people deny only to realize later you were right. That's not guessing, that's remembrance. You're recalling something your spirit already lived. What unsettles the most is that this memory cannot be extracted, stolen, or replicated. No matter how much they study you, they can't access it because it doesn't belong to your conscious mind. It belongs to the eternal imprint within you, and that keeps them restless. You're living proof that some knowledge doesn't come from books or systems, it comes from beyond. Third, you see patterns they desperately try to hide. This is one of the rarest and most unsettling powers you possess. While most people are distracted by surface details, rehearsed words, appearances, your focus cuts deeper. You don't need weeks to piece things together. The truth reveals itself to you instantly, as if your eyes are wired to connect dots that others deliberately scatter. What frustrates people the most is that you don't need them to confess or explain. You've already seen through the disguise. This isn't about suspicion or paranoia. It's a clarity that comes naturally. Lies don't just sound wrong, they feel wrong. A tone, a pause, a detail, and you know the whole story isn't being told. No matter how polished someone's mask is, you sense the cracks beneath it. That's why some people can't stay comfortable around you. It's not that you expose them publicly, it's that they can feel you've already seen past their performance. The reason this is so powerful is because society runs on illusion. People wear roles. Families keep secrets. Workplaces build cultures on half-truths. Many survive by making sure no one questions what's really happening. But you, by simply existing, unravel those illusions. It's not always loud, sometimes it's just a look, a question, or the way you refuse to be fooled that shakes everything. They realize they can't keep their cover story intact when you're around. Investigators are confused because you don't follow the usual steps. They're used to evidence, witnesses, and lengthy processes, but your discernment is almost immediate. You walk into a situation and sense the real dynamics without needing proof. To outsiders, this feels impossible, almost unfair, because it bypasses the rules of how they believe truth is discovered. But that's what makes it mysterious. Your perception doesn't come from observation alone. It comes from alignment with something higher that reveals what's hidden. This is why people fear being around you. Their carefully hidden motives, their practiced deceptions, their secret intentions, none of it survives long in your presence. And no matter how much they try to deny it deep down, they know you see too much. You notice the thread behind the tapestry, and that truth once seen can never be unseen. Fourth, your resilience defies human logic. By all standards, you shouldn't be where you are today. The weight of betrayal, loss, rejection, and hardship should have crushed you. People who went through half of what you faced are no longer themselves. Some gave up, some lost their spark, some turned into shells. Yet here you are, still carrying light, still walking with purpose, still refusing to become what your circumstances tried to make you. That alone unsettles everyone watching. They look at your story and wonder how you keep rising. They expect scars to become permanent wounds. But in your case, pain becomes transformation. They wait for the day you finally collapse under the pressure, but you emerge sharper, stronger, more focused. You take losses that should have buried you, but you don't sink. You use the rubble to build higher. It doesn't make sense because they've never seen someone who turns destruction into fuel. What they don't understand is that your strength isn't mere recovery. It comes from being unbreakable. You're not patching yourself up, you're unbreakable. Pain may bend you, but it never defines you. Attacks may wound you, but they never own you. That's why you never return as the same version of yourself. You come back evolved, wiser, more untouchable. This resilience shakes people because it reveals a truth they don't want to face. Not all strength is human. There's something beyond flesh and willpower operating in you, something that refuses to let you stay down no matter how many times life tries to bury you. That's why you've been studied, doubted, envied. They see the blows land, but they can't understand why you don't stay broken. What they're slowly realizing is that resilience isn't just what you do, it's who you are, and no logic can ever explain that. Fifth, you influence without trying, and that terrifies them. Influence is supposed to come with effort, speeches, arguments, charisma, manipulation. But with you it happens naturally. The way you carry yourself, the decisions you make, even the things you refuse to do have a ripple effect. Someone watches you choose integrity and suddenly they're questioning their own compromises. Another notices how you walk away from toxic situations and it plants a seed in them to do the same. You don't convince, you convict, and that unsettles those who prefer the comfort of excuses. This kind of influence isn't about power, it's about disrupting what people thought was normal. Conversations change because you're at the table. Plans shift because your energy makes the wrong choice feel heavy. People adjust themselves not because you ask, but because your very being exposes the weight of their own choices. That's what terrifies them. You don't fight for control, yet control bends around you. What they don't want to admit is that your influence reveals their weakness. If they truly believed in their values, your presence wouldn't shake them. But it does, showing that they already know their foundation is fragile. That's why some admire you and some resent you. It's the same effect filtered through their own truth or denial. To one person, your influence feels like liberation. To another, it feels like a threat. Either way, no one walks away unchanged. The strangest part is that you're not even trying, you're simply being yourself. That makes it more powerful because there's no strategy to resist. They can argue with a preacher, ignore a politician, or unfollow a leader, but they can't erase the silent impact of someone who lives their truth fully. Your influence lingers, and the more they try to resist it, the more it exposes how much they're already affected. That's the real power you carry, not forcing change, but making it unavoidable. Sixth, you carry an untouchable authority. Titles, wealth, and position can't explain it. In a world obsessed with status, people are used to authority being given. But with you, it's different. Your authority isn't handed down, it radiates naturally. And no social ranking can override it. Those who outrank you still feel the pull of your presence. They sense a weight in you their achievements can't duplicate. This authority isn't loud, you don't have to shout, threaten, or brag. It's woven into how you carry yourself, the calm in your tone, the certainty in your choices. When you speak, people listen because your words carry a gravity others can't fake. And when you don't speak, that silence feels heavier than someone else's speech. People feel it. That's why you've seen rooms shift in response to you even when you weren't trying to lead. What unsettles them is that your authority can't be taken away. You can lose money, be excluded, lied about, underestimated. But the authority you carry doesn't shrink, it doesn't rely on circumstance. The more others try to strip it, the more visible it becomes. Every attempt highlights that your authority was never theirs to give or remove. It belongs to you like a seal stamped into your being long before anyone noticed. This is why people feel conflicted around you. Some respect you without knowing why, drawn to the stability you carry. Others resent you because they realize they can't duplicate your presence no matter what they achieve. It's not earned, it's embodied. That truth unsettles those who rely on systems to define their worth. They may outrank you on paper, but in the presence of real authority, the illusion collapses. You remind them that true authority doesn't sit in offices or bank accounts, it sits in the spirit, and yours cannot be touched. Seventh, you don't belong to time the way they do. That makes people uneasy. Most people live in constant reaction, fixing the past or scrambling for the future. They're trapped in deadlines, clocks, and the anxiety of running out of time. But you move differently. Your rhythm confuses them because you aren't chasing or holding on. You move with a calm, as if you already know where things are headed, as if you've already seen the outcome. This unsettles people because control is often tied to time. They pressure others with urgency and fear of missing out, but none of that seems to work on you. You don't panic when they expect you to. You don't crumble when they say time is running out. Instead, you carry a patience that doesn't make sense. While they're sprinting, you're walking, yet you still arrive at the right place without losing yourself. That's why they study you. They want to know how someone can refuse to rush, yet never fall behind. You aren't aligned with clocks, but with something beyond them. You sense timing in a way they can't calculate: when to wait, when to act, when to let go. Because of this, you avoid traps where they leap too soon or hold on too long. You move at the rhythm of something higher, outside the ordinary flow of time. That's why people often realize later that your choices made sense. To them, it looks like foresight. To you, it feels like being in step with what's already written. This disorients others. They're tied to calendars, but you live. Knowing that time bends around alignment. You're not late, not early, you're exact. No matter how much they measure or predict you, they can't, because your steps aren't governed by human schedules. You remind them that time doesn't own everyone. Some move in harmony with eternity, and you are one of them. 8th, your eyes carry the weight of witness. No one can deny it once they've looked into them. It's not about intimidation, it's deeper. People feel exposed under your gaze, not because you're accusing them, but because your presence confirms what they already know. Your eyes are a mirror reflecting the truth they've been trying to bury. That's why people get restless when you simply look at them. You're not pulling confessions, your being reminds them of the truths they can no longer escape. Investigators have noticed people open up to you in ways that make no sense. They reveal secrets they swore to carry to the grave. They admit mistakes without pressure. They confess intentions without knowing why. It's as if your presence loosens deception, forcing the truth to rise. Where others interrogate, you simply exist and the truth unravels. This unnerves people because it strips control. They can control how much they reveal, they can control what mask they wear, but they can't control how they feel when your eyes meet theirs. Something shifts, as though their defenses feel pointless. In that moment, the truth feels heavier than ever. Some crumble, some lash out, some feel liberated, but no one is unaffected. The power of your eyes isn't about what you see physically, it's about the spiritual weight. It carries history, wisdom, discernment, and alignment. That's why it can't be faked. Others may copy your confidence, but they can't duplicate how people respond to your eyes. It's not charisma, it's conviction. You unsettle people because you don't just witness their actions, you witness their truth. And whether they love or resist you, they can't deny it. When you look at them, they feel seen in a way that no mask can hide. 9th, you can't be bribed by their rewards. That unsettles people more than anything. Society is built on bait. Money, status, attention, and most people bend their values. This is how control works. But you break that system because you don't chase what they use to control everyone else. They can't wave a prize and expect you to follow, making you dangerous to structures built on manipulation. When they realize you aren't impressed by titles, wealth, or validation, it frustrates them. If someone can't be bought, they can't be controlled. Your value system is wired differently. You don't move for applause, you don't compromise for gain. Peace means more than money, integrity weighs more than attention, and purpose outranks every empty reward. This confuses people who measure worth through material markers. They can't grasp why someone would walk away from opportunities others would kill for. But it's simple: if it costs your soul, it's not worth the price. This is why they study you, question you, resent you. You're proof that their system of bait doesn't work on everyone, shaking the weakness of their control. It's easy to manipulate the masses when everyone has a price. But what do they do with someone who has no price? Someone who can't be seduced by what they've been trained to worship. That's a mystery they can't solve. Your refusal to bow doesn't mean you reject success. It means you refuse to be ruled by it. You don't chase, you attract. You don't compromise, you align, and that terrifies them. You're operating on a value system they can't touch. To them, it's a puzzle. To you, it's freedom. Once they realize you aren't for sale, they have no leverage, and in a world built on control that makes you unstoppable. 10th, your intuition bypasses logic and still lands correctly. That unsettles anyone who tries to understand you through reasoning. Most people rely on patterns, probabilities, evidence. They need numbers, formulas, security. But you operate differently. You don't need proof to know the truth. You simply know, and when you act, the results line up, leaving people speechless. To them, it looks like guessing. To you, it feels like tuning into a stream of information that doesn't come from this world. This is not superstition. It's as if you have access to a higher form of data not recorded on paper or stored in servers. Where machines and institutions fail to predict, your intuition cuts through instantly. You sense danger, recognize opportunities, and detect intentions. No matter how much others dismiss it as coincidence, your accuracy proves it's something deeper. This unsettles investigators because it exposes the limits of science. They believe everything should be measurable, yet you're moving with a wisdom that outruns their calculations. They can track statistics, but they can't track the quiet voice that points you to the truth. They can program machines, but they can't replicate how you sense the unseen. That bothers them because it means the human spirit is not as predictable as they would like to believe. Your intuition doesn't make you reckless, it makes you precise. You don't always need the full picture, you're aligned with the source of the picture. While others waste time doubting you move at the right moment, that frustrates them. They want to reduce you to logic, but your life proves there's a wisdom that logic can't hold, and you're living proof of it. 11th, you make the hidden order in chaos visible. That's a power few understand. Most people crumble when things fall apart. Confusion takes over because they can't see beyond the noise. But while everyone else is running, you stand still long enough to notice the thread. You don't just survive chaos, you interpret it. You pull meaning out of madness, unnerving those who rely on disorder to keep people blind. The world thrives on confusion. Systems overwhelm, distract, and scatter attention so people never see what's happening. But you don't get lost in the fog, you notice the patterns, the structures. Where others see random events, you see orchestration. This vision makes you harder to manipulate because you're not reacting to the surface. You're paying attention to the truth. This ability unsettles those who study you because it dismantles one of their most powerful weapons, manufactured chaos. When people are confused, they're easy to control. They accept half-truths, follow false leaders, and surrender judgment. But when you step in, the illusion doesn't last. Your perspective untangles the web and exposes the design. You can point to the detail others missed, connect the dots they overlooked, and reveal the structure that was never meant to be seen. Suddenly, chaos isn't chaos. It's a system, and once people see the system, they're no longer trapped. What's striking is that you don't force calm by pretending everything is fine. You carry calm because you know everything is connected. You recognize that storms don't just destroy, they reveal. Instead of panicking, you read what the storm is trying to say. That's why you make choices that others think are reckless, only for it to become clear later that you were right. You weren't guessing, you were reading the hidden order. This is why you can't be easily controlled. You don't get distracted by the noise you see too clearly. You see the order in the chaos, and once you see it, no one can use it against you. 12th, you heal without medicine and they can't explain it. That unsettles people in ways they don't admit. It's not about hospitals, it's about restoration. When people are around you, something begins to loosen. Their burdens don't feel as heavy. Their thoughts slow down, their bitterness softens. Even if they don't say it, they leave lighter, clearer, freer without knowing why. And that is a mystery they can't reduce to science. This healing goes beyond the physical. Yes, people feel ease, but the greater impact is emotional, mental, and spiritual. Someone who came drained walks away renewed. Someone who was anxious finds peace. Someone carrying pain feels safe enough to release it. You don't hand them a pill, but their spirit responds to yours. That's why they study you, because it doesn't fit the models they've built. What terrifies systems built on dependency is that you represent a cure they can't control, sell, or package. Industries thrive on keeping people wounded, dependent, unstable, starved. If people healed, a lot of these systems would collapse. But when you walk into a room, healing takes place in ways no one profits from. You don't bind people to you. You free them. You don't give them something they have to keep coming back for. You awaken what was already inside them. That makes you powerful and threatening to structures that rely on brokenness. The most unsettling part is that you don't even try. Healing flows because of who you are. You've walked through your own pain and you transmuted it into medicine for others. That's why your presence carries this effect. You became what you needed, and now you are that for others. They can't explain it, copy it, or stop it. You're a reminder that healing isn't always found in a bottle. It's found in a person who radiates wholeness, and you are that person. 13th, you turn isolation into acceleration. Most people can't wrap their heads around it. For the average person, being cut off feels like suffocation. They shrink, they lose themselves. But you are built differently. What others used to punish you, silence, abandonment, rejection, exclusion, becomes your training ground. The environment designed to weaken you ends up sharpening you. While they think they've buried you, you are building and expanding. Isolation didn't strip you, it focused it. It gave you space to hear yourself without the noise. In solitude, your clarity sharpened. The clutter fell away and you began to hear what most never paused to notice. The creativity that sparked wasn't born of comfort, it was born of necessity. When you had no one to lean on, you discovered resources inside yourself that most people never tap into. That's why investigators can't understand. The tools that should have broken you became the tools that built you. People are taught to fear being alone, to think of solitude as punishment. But you turned it into a forge that refined you, not consumed you. Every hour that looked wasted in loneliness was investment. Every silent night was a blueprint unfolding. While they assumed you were idle, you were accelerating. Your strength, insight, and sense of self were forged in unseen hours, and that's the part that terrifies. You don't come out of isolation weaker, you come out unrecognizable. They expect scars, but you emerge with sharper vision. They expect hesitation, but you step forward with certainty. They expect someone broken, but they meet someone unstoppable. You prove that solitude is not a prison, it's an incubator. You became living evidence that rejection doesn't end a person. It recalibrates them, and because of that, every attempt to isolate you only accelerated your purpose. What was meant to slow you down became the very reason you can't be caught. 14th, you've made peace with death, and that makes you untouchable. For most people, death is the ultimate threat, the shadow that dictates choices and the fear that controls moves. It's not just the end, it's the smaller deaths too. Death of reputation, comfort, control, being liked. People shape their lives around avoiding these endings. But you're different. You already crossed that threshold, and because of that, fear has no chain strong enough to bind you. When a person has accepted death, life can't be used against them, and that makes you unshakable. Systems of control rely on fear. Fear of being fired, silenced, losing standing, being rejected. But you've already surrendered those outcomes. Reputation, you've watched it burn. Comfort, you've lived without it. Even physical death no longer paralyzes you because you know that what you carry can't be buried. That freedom terrifies those who study you because it makes you immune to control. This is resolve, not recklessness. It's not that you don't value life, it's that you don't cling to it in desperation. You found a deeper anchor that sits beyond the grave. That's why people can't intimidate you. Threats don't work, manipulation doesn't stick. They're baffled because the things that silence most people only make you bolder. What unnerves them is how this peace radiates from you. It's not loud, it's quiet, but undeniable. When others panic at the thought of loss, you remain calm, you stand steady. That steadiness isn't human logic, it's the power of someone who has already rehearsed the worst-case scenario and realized it holds no power. That's why you can walk into situations that would break others and remain whole. You don't move with arrogance, but with a certainty that life and death don't dictate your essence, and that's the greatest freedom. You are no longer governed by fear. Someone who doesn't fear death can't be manipulated by life. Every thread we've pulled points back to one undeniable truth: you are carrying powers that can't be explained, replicated, or controlled. They've investigated your resilience, your intuition, your authority, your ability to heal. Shift, accelerate, and live free of fear. What they call mystery is simply the reality of who you are, someone whose essence refuses to bow to systems, pressures, or manipulation. You're not trying to be extraordinary, you just are. You don't force influence, it radiates. You don't chase validation, it collapses. You don't bend under isolation or fear, you transform them into strength. That's why they're baffled, why they study, why they whisper, because you are proof that a person can move through this world unowned, untamed, and unbroken. So when you notice the investigations, don't shrink back. It means you've stepped into a realm they can't chart. It means you've become the evidence they never wanted to exist, that spirits outrun systems and that truth outruns deception. And if they can't explain you, they certainly can't stop you. If this spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Consider sharing this with someone who needs to be reminded of their power. Let's keep building a community of strength and truth, and truth, and truth, and truth, and truth. Welcome the resilient ones. The only thing more treacherous than a lie is the truth silenced for too long. Let that resonate within you. Now envision discovering that the person you held dearest had meticulously crafted a betrayal so profound it induced visceral distress in onlookers. And the ironic twist, it wasn't merely a superficial act of disloyalty. This was a painstakingly crafted, sophisticated betrayal steeped in deception and served with a generous helping of public humiliation. Consider this: scientific research indicates that betrayal activates the same neural pathways as physical agony, which explains why some of you felt an overwhelming need for immediate medical and legal assistance. But in your case, chosen one, this wasn't a mere scratch to your spirit. This was major surgery performed with crude instruments by someone you trusted implicitly. Yet you endured it with remarkable fortitude, composed, unyielding, like a seasoned observer witnessing a poorly executed magic trick. That's what astonished people the most. Not just the magnitude of the betrayal itself, but the almost supernatural grace with which you navigated it. And be assured your adversaries were unprepared for that unexpected development. Firstly, you weathered a degree of treachery that would have transformed most people into the very monsters they were combating. That is not an exaggeration. It's an irrefutable truth. There exists a threshold where pain and betrayal penetrate so deeply that they fundamentally alter a person's thoughts, words, and interactions with the world. Many are unable to recover from that point. They lose their identity and they fortify their hearts to resist any form of kindness. They speak with a constant undercurrent of bitterness and approach every new relationship with suspicion. They become so preoccupied with self-preservation that they cease to truly live. And in the most extreme cases, they conclude that the only way to survive is to adopt the same unethical tactics as those who wronged them. You resisted that temptation. And that's what renders your narrative both disquieting for some and inspiring for others. They watched you absorb blow after blow, anticipating, this is the breaking point, but it never materialized. You didn't succumb to cruelty. You didn't devise elaborate schemes for revenge like a character in a melodramatic television show. You refused to internalize their malevolence simply to secure a victory. You remain true to yourself, and that is an extraordinary feat when the pain is so deeply ingrained. The significance of this is amplified by the fact that those around you witness the severity of the situation. They observed the humiliation, the grief, the sleepless nights you couldn't articulate, the profound sense of depletion. They recognized opportunities where you could have retaliated and no one would have condemned you. Yet you consistently refrained. That level of self-control is unsettling because it compels people to contemplate whether they could exercise similar restraint. The reality is most cannot. They would have allowed that betrayal to redefine them, to reshape their character, and to corrupt their moral compass. But you refuse to allow the darkness of another's soul to extinguish the light within you. And that is why your survival is not merely about remaining alive. It's about preserving your essential self. You didn't just escape unscathed. You emerged whole. That is a level of triumph that most people will never experience because it's not about overpowering another individual. It's about refusing to compromise your integrity in the process. That is the kind of survival that elicits both awe and fury in your enemies, who are enraged by their inability to break you. Secondly, their betrayal was not solely directed at you. It was an assault on everyone who still believed in the inherent goodness of humanity. When such heinous acts occur in secrecy, they can be dismissed as isolated incidents. But when they unfold publicly, they do more than injure the individual at the center. They send ripples throughout the community, undermining the collective sense of safety, fairness, and justice. Individuals who once felt secure in their understanding of loyalty begin to question its very existence. Those who trusted their ability to discern character start to doubt their own judgment. It's not just your heart that sustained damage. It's the collective belief in basic decency that suffered a blow. The reason this betrayal provoked such distress was not merely its cruelty, but its calculated nature. The cold, deliberate planning behind it forces observers to confront the reality that evil is not always loud or conspicuous. Sometimes it wears a mask of friendship for years before striking. That's a difficult truth for those who have based their lives on the belief that they can distinguish between friend and foe. And this is where the damage penetrates deeper than most recognize. You weren't just a victim in their eyes, you were a symbol of something they believed was still inviolable: trust, love, friendship, whatever bond you shared. Witnessing that bond being so brazenly violated felt like watching the last beacon of hope extinguished. It wasn't just what they did to you. It was the implicit message that no connection, regardless of its apparent strength, is immune to betrayal. The most disturbing aspect for many was realizing how close they might have been to experiencing a similar fate. Seeing it happen to you prompted them to reevaluate every conversation, every promise made to them, wondering if their own circles harbored a traitor silently plotting. You inadvertently became proof that no one is invulnerable. That's why this was a matter of broader significance. Your pain was personal, but its impact was universal. The betrayal forced people to acknowledge that darkness can stand beside you smiling while simultaneously plotting your destruction. And while that truth is unsettling, it's also why your resilience resonated so profoundly, because you demonstrated that even in a world where such treachery exists, it is still possible to emerge triumphant. And to do so without becoming the same kind of person who inflicted harm. Thirdly, they were counting on the disintegration of your mental state, not just the demise of your physical existence. Their objective was not simply to defeat you, it was to dismantle you from within. Their goal was never merely to undermine your opportunities, your reputation, or your stability. That would have been too simplistic. They sought to witness your sense of self publicly crumble. They wanted you to lose your sense of identity so completely that even you would no longer recognize yourself. This wasn't an attack on your physical well-being. It was psychological warfare designed to erase your essence while leaving your body functioning. They operated on the premise that sufficient humiliation, isolation, and stress would induce a mental breakdown. Once that occurred, they could control the narrative. They could portray you as unstable, bitter, or self-destructive, and people would readily accept it because you would be too broken to defend yourself. That's how meticulously their strategy was crafted. They weren't just trying to inflict immediate pain. They were attempting to permanently damage your legacy. What makes this even more insidious is that they intended for it to appear as though it were your own fault. The trap was to provoke you into an outburst so that they could then claim, "See, this is their true nature." They aimed to lure you into becoming the very caricature they had been portraying behind your back. And had you fallen for it, they would have possessed all the necessary evidence to rewrite the truth to their advantage. But here's the element they failed to anticipate: you refused to adhere to their script. You denied them the public spectacle they eagerly anticipated. You didn't retaliate in ways that could be twisted against you. Instead, you maintained your composure even when it meant enduring suffering in silence for a longer duration than most could withstand. That choice suffocated their plan. The reason people are repulsed now is that they realize how close they came to witnessing the systematic destruction of a human being and how intentional the attempt was. They're not just disgusted by the event itself, they're shaken by its methodical nature. Your survival without succumbing to despair did not merely save your own sanity. It shattered the entire illusion they had painstakingly constructed, and that's why, even though they believed they were scripting your demise, all they truly accomplished was paving the way for a more powerful beginning. Fourthly, you were the last person they should have selected for this type of conflict. They genuinely believed they had chosen the ideal target, someone they could methodically dismantle until nothing remained but acquiescence and defeat. They mistook your kindness for vulnerability, your patience for inaction, and your silence for submission. In their estimation, you were an easy target. What they failed to recognize was that you were not solely relying on your own strength. You were connected to something far beyond the reach of human malice. Your resilience was not even a factor in their calculations. They anticipated a brief struggle, a swift collapse, a clean resolution where you would quietly fade away and they would emerge victorious. They had no contingency plan for the possibility that you would refuse to yield. They had no alternative strategy for someone who continued to stand despite the relentless barrage of attacks. The more they pushed, the more they revealed their own insecurities, because every unsuccessful attempt to destroy you only served to highlight their desperate need for you to break in order to validate their own existence. They failed to comprehend that you had weathered storms long before they even knew your name. You had endured losses, betrayals, and trials that would have instantly crushed them. What they presented was not novel. It was merely another chapter in a book you had been surviving for years. And because you had overcome worse, their cruelty seemed more like background noise than the earth-shattering attack they intended it to be. The advantage of operating at a higher level of awareness is that you process attacks differently. You don't interpret every wound as a reason to surrender. You perceive it as confirmation that you possess something too valuable to remain unchallenged. And that's what they inadvertently revealed. By targeting you, they exposed the extent to which your presence, your influence, and your resilience posed a threat. Now they find themselves in the most unenviable position imaginable, embroiled in a conflict they initiated but cannot win. They ignited a fire, hoping it would consume you, but it only refined you. And instead of witnessing your demise, they are now compelled to confront the reality that they have made you stronger, more focused, and a greater obstacle to their plans than ever before. Fifthly, the manner in which you handled the situation shifted the focus from the scandal to their character. They were convinced they were orchestrating the perfect public spectacle. A scandal so damaging that it would forever tarnish your reputation. Every action they took was designed to drag you through the mud while they maintained a safe distance, feigning neutrality. In their narrative, people would remember the story they fabricated, not the truth. They believed the whispers would follow you indefinitely, shaping the world's perception of you. But the way you conducted yourself completely upended their carefully laid plans in a way they never anticipated. You didn't react according to their expectations. You didn't descend into frantic defenses, desperate explanations, or emotional outbursts that they could exploit as evidence against you. You didn't engage in public rants or attempt to tear them down to salvage your own reputation. Instead, you exhibited a level of composure that made people question everything they had been told. That composure created a fissure in their narrative, and through that fissure, the truth began to emerge. The more you maintained your equilibrium, the more scrutiny they faced. People began to notice inconsistencies in their behavior, subtle discrepancies in their stories, and the unsettling satisfaction they seemed to derive from the chaos. What was intended as a trial against you transformed into an examination of their true identities. And when people finally recognized the depth of their deception, it ceased to be your shame and became their burden. Now when the scandal is mentioned, it no longer revolves around your supposed actions. It revolves around the extent of their capacity for deception. The narrative has shifted entirely. It's a case study in manipulation, cruelty, and the lengths to which someone will go to destroy another human being. And the irony is that they themselves constructed that platform. They were so determined to publicly expose you that they failed to realize they were walking directly into the spotlight themselves. The shame they attempted to inflict upon you never materialized because you refused to accept it. Instead, it circled back and settled precisely where it belonged on their conscience. And here's the aspect that torments them the most: the world is no longer discussing your downfall. They're analyzing their soul, their choices, and their inability to stand beside you without appearing insignificant. Sixthly, you demonstrated that strength doesn't always announce itself overtly. Sometimes it simply refuses to be extinguished. They were betting everything on a dramatic display. They needed you to erupt, to scream, to weep, to create a scene that would validate every lie they had been spreading about you behind closed doors. In their minds, the only way to validate their version of events was to provoke you into reacting precisely as they desired. But instead of granting them that satisfaction, you did the one thing they hadn't prepared for. You remained steadfast. You didn't provide them with fireworks. You gave them a silence that resonated more powerfully than any outburst could have. That restraint wasn't about feigning a lack of pain. It wasn't about suppressing your emotions or attempting to project an image of strength for the sake of appearances. It was about recognizing that not every battle is won through aggressive action. Some are won by allowing the enemy to exhaust their resources while you remain standing. Your refusal to be drawn into chaos deprived their betrayal of the sustenance it needed to thrive. Without your emotional reaction to fuel it, their entire plan began to falter. People often mistake loudness for strength, but there exists a power in stillness that most will never comprehend. It's the kind of strength that doesn't seek recognition, doesn't demand an audience, and doesn't crumble when no one is offering encouragement. You didn't need to assert your strength. You simply refused to succumb to the storm they unleashed upon you. That refusal itself became the most powerful statement you could have made. What unsettled them most was realizing their lack of control over you. They couldn't provoke you into a public meltdown, and they couldn't incite you to self-destruction. Every time you chose not to react, you forced them to bear the weight of their own actions without any distraction to conceal them. The silence they anticipated would make you appear weak became the mirror that revealed their true nature to everyone. Ultimately, your quiet resilience didn't merely protect you, it dismantled their entire strategy. They desired chaos, but you responded with composure. They desired a spectacle, but you provided them with nothing to witness except their own guilt. And that is the kind of strength that doesn't simply survive betrayal. It transforms it into their downfall. Seventhly, you didn't just lose individuals, you lost entire illusions about the world. The betrayal cost you more than just relationships. It shattered the illusions you once held about how the world operates and the true nature of people. Prior to this event, you adhered to certain unspoken rules that you believed everyone observed. Loyalty was meaningful. Promises held weight. Friendship had its boundaries. But when people you trusted transgressed those boundaries so readily, it wasn't just your heart that was broken. It was the framework upon which you had based your understanding of humanity. What made it even more devastating was that you weren't the only one affected. The people who witnessed the event, whether directly involved or observing from afar, experienced a shift as well. It was as though a collective innocence had been stripped away in real time. Suddenly, those who believed they could detect danger or deception learned that evil doesn't always appear in the guise of a villain. Sometimes it presents itself as a friend, a mentor, a family member. And that's a truth that most people are ill-prepared to confront until it's forced upon them. Part of the pervasive sense of unease stemmed from that forced realization. It wasn't solely about their actions toward you. It was about what those actions revealed about the potential consequences when greed, envy, or malice take control of a human being. For many, it was the first time they realized that the people smiling at them across the table could also be the ones plotting their demise. That kind of realization lingers indefinitely. And here's the truth. Once those illusions are shattered, they're gone forever. You can forgive, you can heal, but you cannot erase what you have witnessed. That is why this betrayal altered the atmosphere not just for you, but for everyone who bore witness. The sense of moral safety that people thought they possessed was destroyed, and in its place arose a more sobering truth. Trust is not something to be given indiscriminately, and not everyone who claims to support you will actually do so when it matters most. What you lost wasn't just individuals, it was an entire chapter of your worldview. And while that loss is painful, it is also what compelled you and others to begin seeing the world as it truly is. That awareness may feel burdensome, but it is the kind of weight that hones discernment and ensures that no one will ever catch you off guard in the same manner again. Eighthly, they transformed your existence into a test case and failed miserably. They treated your life as an experiment, as though you were some kind of project they could manipulate, deconstruct, and use as proof that no one could withstand the type of pressure they were about to exert. They intended to make you a public example, a cautionary tale to anyone who dared to project too much confidence, integrity, or positivity. In their estimation, once they had sufficiently humiliated you, you would crumble, and they could point to you as evidence that no one is invulnerable. But instead of validating their hypothesis, you shattered it. What they designed as a study in destruction became a living, breathing illustration of the limitations of human cruelty. They underestimated the depth of your spirit, and they overlooked the fact that some people are built with a foundation that doesn't crack under the weight of evil. It becomes stronger. Every blow they inflicted didn't produce the collapse they predicted. It revealed a resilience that embarrassed them in front of everyone who was watching. The truth is that they were never merely attacking you. They were sending a message to everyone else. If we can break this person, we can break anyone. And that's precisely why their failure is so devastating. Instead of proving your vulnerability, they proved the durability of your will. Instead of discouraging others, they ended up inspiring them. What was intended to be your downfall became the very thing that amplified your influence. Now, the case study they intended to present to the world is being analyzed for an entirely different reason. People aren't discussing how you were destroyed. They're discussing how you refused to yield. They're dissecting the way you maintained your composure without becoming bitter, the way you outmaneuvered their schemes without stooping to their level. Their greatest error wasn't in attacking you, it was in believing that you could be reduced to a victim in their narrative. You have become the proof that resilience knows no bounds, and that no amount of malice can outlast a soul that is anchored in something unshakable. And now the only remaining lesson from their experiment is that the weapon they attempted to use against you will never work on someone who refuses to surrender. Ninthly, you made forgiveness appear as a weapon, not a weakness. You didn't choose forgiveness because they deserved it. You chose it because you refused to allow their poison to permeate your being, holding on to hatred, replaying every detail, plotting retribution. That's precisely what they were hoping for. They wanted you trapped in the same dark realm from which they were operating, because as long as you remained there, they would still exert influence over you. Forgiveness wasn't about granting them peace. It was about reclaiming your own. The power in the way you forgave is that it wasn't the gentle, timid version that most people imagine. It was strategic, deliberate, and unwavering. You weren't excusing their actions, and you weren't pretending they didn't matter. You fully acknowledged them and still refused to allow them to define your life. That's where the weapon aspect comes in. By letting go, you severed the last thread connecting you to their control. You denied them the satisfaction of seeing you consumed by the same bitterness that consumes them. This kind of forgiveness is unsettling for people like them because it eliminates the conflict they were preparing for. They anticipated resistance. They were prepared for a protracted back-and-forth struggle that would keep you entangled with them indefinitely. Instead, you exited the arena completely, leaving them swinging at thin air. It's difficult to maintain the role of victor when your target no longer acknowledges you as a worthy opponent. And here's the part they'll never admit publicly: your forgiveness exposed their pettiness. It demonstrated to everyone that they were still clinging to grudges, still attempting to settle scores, while you had already progressed to bigger and better endeavors. It left them appearing small, bitter, and trapped in a cycle from which they cannot escape. Ultimately, you proved that forgiveness isn't about absolving someone of responsibility. It's about ensuring that they don't drag you down with them. It's the clean break that allows you to keep your soul untainted, your mind clear, and your path open. And in doing so, you didn't just win the battle. You ended the entire war on your own terms. 10th, you were their darkest secret long before the betrayal. Long before they acted, you already occupied the darkest recesses of their minds. They might have smiled in your presence, applauded your achievements, and played the part of supporter, but beneath the surface, resentment was quietly taking root. You were a constant reminder of everything they lacked, everything they secretly envied. Your success was a mirror reflecting their insecurities, and your light exposed the shadows they desperately tried to conceal. That's why they needed to diminish you, to tear you down, to extinguish the flame that so brightly illuminated their own inadequacies. The betrayal wasn't just a calculated act of malice. It was a desperate attempt to silence the voice within them that whispered of your superiority. And in the end, it backfired spectacularly, proving that the most formidable force is a spirit that refuses to be dimmed. So in essence, the message here is that even when faced with the most profound betrayals, the kind that shake us to our core and challenge our faith in humanity, you have the power to choose how you respond. You can choose to rise above, to preserve your integrity, and to emerge stronger, leaving behind a legacy of resilience and self-respect. Your survival is not just about living through it. It's about thriving afterward, unbroken and unbowed. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you ever experienced something similar or seen someone navigate betrayal with incredible grace? Share your stories, ask questions, or just join the conversation in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future insights and explorations like this. Let's keep the conversation going and build a community of resilience together. Resilience together. Resilience together. Resilience together. Welcome, discerning souls. Approach the sacred with reverence. Never underestimate the power residing in quietude. Within those who possess a stillness that defies understanding lies a profound connection, a direct line to the celestial realm. For when others fail to decipher the depths of your spirit, dismissing it as mere emptiness, they remain blissfully unaware that the silence of the chosen is not a void, but a reservoir brimming with potent presence. And when someone dares to challenge that presence, to test its boundaries, they are not merely initiating a conflict, but unwittingly igniting a spiritual war for which they are woefully ill-equipped. Consider this stark reality frequently overlooked. In ancient societies, spiritual authority often superseded earthly titles. A village chieftain could be overruled by a humble elder, barefoot and unassuming, yet possessing mastery over the unseen forces that shape our world. Now reflect upon your own position. Are you merely the holder of a title, or the spirit walker who commands atmospheres without uttering a single word? For the individual who dares to underestimate your aura, to disrespect your journey, or to measure your soul with the crude instruments of worldly standards invariably finds themselves entangled in a web of unforeseen consequences. They have not simply misjudged you. They have unwittingly stumbled into a crucible that exposes their own limitations. And the irony, many remain oblivious to the true cause of their misfortunes, attributing it to mere happenstance. Oh, it must be Mercury in retrograde, they lament. But no, my friend, it is the inevitable repercussions of interfering with a frequency far beyond their comprehension. So brace yourselves, for we are about to delve into the profound consequences that befall those who tamper with the divinely consecrated. They assumed you were ordinary until their ill-conceived tests revealed otherwise. Let us explore the brutal truth. Number 1. They mistook your gentleness for a lack of authority. This is where they erred most grievously. They observed your calm demeanor, your quiet strength, your refusal to engage in petty squabbles, and concluded that you were weak. In their limited worldview, one who does not vociferously assert themselves lacks the capacity for force. However, they failed to grasp that true spiritual power seldom requires boisterous displays. It needs no theatrics, no performative rituals. You need not chant, shout, or wave your hands to wield influence in the spirit realm. Genuine authority walks softly yet shifts the very fabric of reality with effortless grace. They believed they were testing your tolerance, but in truth they were trespassing upon hallowed ground. And spiritual laws are unlike human constructs. There are no warnings issued when dealing with one who has been chosen and marked. Only consequences. They underestimated the realm that stands behind you simply because you chose not to flaunt it. You knew your worth without the need for external validation. Yet they persisted in their tests, driven by a desire to ascertain whether the rumors, the aura, the very feeling they experienced in your presence was mere illusion or a reflection of something real and profound. So they probed, they provoked, they gossiped, they disrespected you, attempting to destabilize that which they could not comprehend, and when no immediate repercussions manifested, they concluded you were powerless. However, divine intervention is not always instantaneous, but always precise. They did not provoke your anger, but rather a response from the spiritual realm which recognized their transgressions. Once that machinery was set in motion, they began to feel the subtle shift. Their meticulously crafted plans began to unravel, their inner peace evaporated, their very life force seemed to drain away. Suddenly, everything felt amiss. They could not trace the source back to you, for you had not lifted a finger in retaliation. Then the creeping tendrils of fear began to constrict their hearts. They realized that they had not merely tested an individual with a strong personality, but someone possessing a divinely bestowed rank, someone backed by the very courts of heaven, by ancestral guardians, and by immutable spiritual laws. You were not simply passive. You were protected. You were not ignoring them. You were being shielded as the heavens intervened on your behalf. They were not dealing with someone who merely fights back, but with someone who does not need to. They had misjudged not merely your character, but the very shield that surrounds you. And now they know the truth. They know your strength resides not in loudness, for true power needs no announcement. Number 2, their attacks unwittingly opened a gateway they could not close. The moment they sought to inflict harm upon you, they activated forces far beyond their reckoning. They did not simply push your buttons, but triggered a spiritual gate, an aperture in reality that they lacked the power to shut once it was opened. It was as if they had unknowingly pressed a divine emergency button. And what emerged was not merely protection, but judgment. They believed they were merely toying with you, unaware that you were spiritually sealed, and that sealed souls are connected to realms that brook no disrespect. They presumed you were simply another person they could manipulate or destroy in the shadows. What they failed to comprehend was that you possessed a spiritual covenant invisible to them, a covenant that carries profound consequences for any who dare to cross its boundaries. And when they tested your spirit, they encountered not mere resistance, but triggered ancestral alarms, angelic responses, and the very enforcement of divine order. You needed not defend yourself, for heaven had already taken up your cause before you could utter a single word. And that is when the tides began to turn in their lives, an inexplicable cascade of misfortune. Relationships crumbled. Financial streams dried up. Plans that once flourished began to collapse for no apparent reason. It was not a curse, but the inevitable aftermath of violating spiritual protocol. They meddled with one who was chosen, one who was covered. The gateway they opened was not theirs to control, and they had no inkling of the forces they were up against. What they intended for harm became the catalyst for their own downfall. And you needed not lift a hand. This is the nature of spiritual rank. Spiritual rank does not boast, but moves with irresistible force when provoked. The protection over your life is not passive, but reactive. It waits patiently until danger presents itself and then responds without seeking your permission. They underestimated the price of testing a consecrated soul, believing you were merely fortunate or spiritually innocuous. But the moment they crossed that invisible line, they were met with a power that silences mouths, shuts doors, and exposes hidden motives. Now they grapple with consequences they cannot undo and are too ashamed to admit they brought them upon themselves by targeting the wrong individual. You did not need to curse them. You simply needed to remain aligned with your divine purpose. The spiritual gate took care of the rest, and they learned the hard way that some doors once opened lead directly to divine correction. Number 3, they sought to defame you until the realm intervened and turned the tide. Their goal was to tarnish your reputation beyond repair, to poison the perceptions of others to the point that no one would ever look at you the same way again. They wove elaborate lies, twisted your words, exaggerated your flaws, and smiled while doing it. They believed that by controlling the narrative, they could control how the world perceived you. However, they failed to account for the profound spiritual protection that shields your very name. For in the physical realm, a name is merely a label. But in the spiritual realm, it carries immense weight. It embodies history, purpose, rank, and identity. Your name is not merely a designation, it is a legal authority sealed within the heavenly archives. They attempted to defame you, but every false accusation they hurled against you ricocheted back, corroding their own credibility. For unbeknownst to them, every time they uttered a falsehood about you, they were in fact testifying against themselves in the spirit realm. They did not anticipate a response from the celestial realm, dismissing their actions as mere words, gossip, hearsay. But the truth is, words spoken against a consecrated soul do not simply dissipate into the air. They are recorded, and heaven listens. Every attempt to assassinate your character became evidence in a courtroom they did not even know existed. So while they were preoccupied with their slanderous campaigns, the realm was diligently collecting evidence. And when the scales tipped, the narrative flipped. People began to notice inconsistencies in their stories, and they were exposed in ways they could not control. Their own lives began to unravel, and still you remained silent. You did not retaliate, did not engage in online squabbles, did not defend yourself, for your spirit knew that your name did not require saving. It was already safeguarded. Your silence was not a sign of weakness, but proof that your vindication was being orchestrated at a level far beyond their reach. Now they wander in confusion, wondering why their smear campaign backfired, why the very people they tried to turn against you now view them with suspicion. The same mouths they used to attempt to destroy your name have now destroyed their own integrity. For when one attempts to discredit a chosen one, they are not merely engaging in a war of words, but challenging a name that was spoken by God Himself, a battle they are destined to lose. Number 4, they underestimated the cost of provoking a consecrated soul. They understood that you were chosen, but failed to recognize that you were also consecrated. There is a profound distinction. To be chosen is to receive a call, but to be consecrated is to have been set apart, processed, sealed, and appointed. It signifies that your life is no longer your own, that your assignment has been inscribed in spiritual law, and that anyone who interferes with it is not merely interfering with you, but with divine will itself. They assumed they were dealing with someone anointed, someone gifted, someone talented. But they were, in fact, dealing with someone who had been spiritually drafted into divine governance. You walk not merely in favor, but in rank. Your actions carry weight in the unseen realms, and your words echo in courts they have never entered. Your life is inextricably linked to blueprints they cannot even begin to comprehend. Thus, when they attempted to sabotage, belittle, mock, or manipulate you, they were not merely engaging in petty behavior, but stepping into a level of spiritual offense they were ill-equipped to handle. This was not merely disrespect, but spiritual treason. They were ignorant of the covenant you carry, the price you paid. In silence, the nights you wrestled with angels, the trials you endured, and the metaphorical deaths you experienced internally to become the soul you are today. You were not placed here by popularity or approval, but by divine instruction. When one attacks a consecrated vessel, they are not attacking a mere person, but resisting God's very agenda. Now they are bewildered. Their lives are undergoing unsettling shifts, closed doors, stagnation, loss, and inexplicable disruptions. They cannot trace the source of their troubles back to you, for you never retaliated. Yet the realm recognized the violation. Heaven heard the insult, and now they are paying the price for a war they initiated against someone they perceived as ordinary. They were unaware that your positioning came with inherent protection, that your silence was not weakness but jurisdiction. They did not realize that the consequences of provoking a consecrated soul are not merely symbolic but real, costly, and irreversible unless divine mercy intervenes. They tested you, and now they know you are not merely chosen. You are sealed. Number 5, they did not anticipate that your spirit would speak louder than their rituals. They were confident in their systems, their candles, symbols, chants, offerings, and spiritual contracts. They delved into the depths of altars and dark practices, attempting to manipulate energy against you. They joined forces with others, whispering your name into smoke and shadows, believing they could block, bind, delay, or destroy that which was never theirs to touch in the first place. But they failed to grasp a fundamental truth. Your very existence is an act of warfare. You need not fight as they do. You are the disruption itself. They did not realize that one who walks in spiritual rank need not actively strive for things to shift. You enter a room and the atmosphere changes. You speak and unseen forces tremble. You offer a single prayer and it nullifies 10 of their combined rituals. Why? Because your spirit does not borrow power. It is backed by the source of all power. When they dared to oppose you, they quickly realized they were not merely confronting a person, but divine backing itself. They believed their rituals were potent, their spells well hidden. But your spirit carries codes that scramble their frequencies, jam their signals, and override their assignments. Suddenly their rituals failed, their hexes returned to sender, and the alliances they forged turned against each other. Their energy dissipated and confusion descended upon their camp. Meanwhile, you did nothing but remain aligned, protected, and focused. That is when they began to fear you, not because you cursed them, but because nothing they attempted could touch you. You were not even attempting to fight. Yet your very existence canceled the systems they trusted. This is the essence of spiritual rank. It is not about the number of books you have read or the number of tools you can wield, but about which realm recognizes your name. When you are truly chosen, truly sealed, your very being speaks louder than any ritual they could ever perform. Now they are cautious and subdued. Some have retreated entirely while others remain confused. Yet deep down, they know they tried everything and none of it worked because you are not spellbound, you are spell-proof. Number 6, their probes exposed them, not you. They entered your life disguised as curious, concerned, or observant individuals, but behind their questions, their smiles, and their feigned support lay a hidden agenda. They sought to gather information, to dissect you, to uncover weaknesses, and to find proof that your spirit was not as pure as it appeared. They aimed to expose you, to discover a flaw, a contradiction, or a hidden fault that they could exploit to bring you down. However, they failed to realize that in the process of observing you, they were being observed. As they scrutinized your soul, as they studied your patterns, their own intentions began to leak. Their bitterness surfaced, their jealousy slipped through the cracks, and their manipulation could no longer remain concealed. You were being tested, yes, but so were they. Where you moved with grace, they moved with ego. Where you remained silent, they plotted, and where you walked in truth, they operated through strategy and deception. What was intended to discredit you became a divine audit, a comprehensive assessment of their own character that they were not even aware was taking place. Every lie they uttered, every scheme they devised, and every insincere smile they wore became spiritual evidence. And one by one their masks began to fall. People began to see through their performances, their alliances began to crumble. Their stories became contradictory, their true motives became evident, and it became clear that they had never been genuine. They believed they were playing a game of chess, but they walked straight into a mirror that reflected not you, but them. The more they attempted to expose your heart, the more their own corruption was laid bare. They believed you were concealing something dark, but the only darkness that was revealed was their own. You passed the test not by being perfect, but by being authentic. They failed not because you exposed them, but because truth always reveals itself. In the end, the only thing their probing uncovered was their inability to tolerate your light. That was never your weakness. It was their confession. Number 7. Your restraint was mistaken for powerlessness. They assumed that because you did not retaliate, you were incapable of doing so. They interpreted your silence as surrender and your patience as evidence of your lack of power, voice, or defense. However, they failed to grasp that one who possesses spiritual rank knows not only when to act, but more importantly, when to refrain from action. You were never afraid and you were never uncertain. You were simply aligned with divine will. Alignment means not responding to every insult or attack. You were not being passive but strategic. They pushed, they poked, and they made provocative statements, hoping to elicit a reaction, but all they received was silence, calm, and stillness. This unnerved them more than any outburst could have. They craved drama, seeking to draw you into a messy conflict and make you lose your composure. They wanted you to fight as they did, to descend into the mud with them, but you were built differently. You understood that to respond would be to step out of alignment. The moment you step out of alignment, you relinquish your protection. So you remained silent and maintained your composure, which they mistook for weakness. They failed to realize that you were not allowing them to win, but allowing them to dig their own grave. Every arrogant word they uttered was contributing to the judgment they would eventually face, and every scheme they devised was setting them up for their own downfall. While they mocked you, heaven was meticulously recording their actions. You possessed knowledge they lacked. Vengeance is not your responsibility. Vindication is. The moment you truly surrendered the situation, handing it over to God, the shift began. Their lives started to unravel, opportunities dried up, peace vanished, and confusion increased. They did not connect these misfortunes to their treatment of you because they were too preoccupied with what they believed you could not do. However, it was never about what you would do, but about what would be done for you. Now they are beginning to understand you did not remain silent because you were powerless, but because the battle was not yours to fight. When heaven intervenes, it fights in ways no human ever could. Number 8. They felt nothing physically, but everything spiritually. They looked you in the face and smirked and made jokes behind your back. They felt bold and untouchable. They said what they wanted and did what they wanted, expecting no consequences. On the surface, it appeared that nothing happened. No fire fell from the sky, no dramatic collapse, just silence and stillness, as if their actions went unnoticed. However, the true repercussions did not manifest in the physical realm, but in the spiritual realm, where they were least prepared. Initially, the effects were subtle: sleepless nights, uneasy feelings, and an inability to settle their energy. Then the burden grew heavier. Nightmares, sudden fear, a sense of being watched, and shadows that lingered persistently. They attempted to dismiss these experiences as stress or coincidence, but deep down, they knew something had shifted, that something had followed them home, and that something had entered the room when they left yours. They could not explain it, but they could feel it, and that feeling became their silent torment. They tested your spirit without understanding the power it carried. They assumed you were ordinary and treated you like a joke. But what they touched was sacred, and what they disrespected was protected. Spiritual protection does not respond with noise, but with precision. When they mocked you, they activated consequences that were not visible and not something they could post online, but consequences that eroded their peace, depleted their energy, and haunted their minds. Some began to withdraw, while others became inexplicably hostile, attempting to project their guilt onto you. But the truth was, they were unraveling not because of you, but because of what touched them after they touched you. You did not need to utter a word or defend yourself. Your spirit was sufficient. The presence you carry has its own inherent reaction, and once triggered, it does not cease until the lesson is learned. Now they tread carefully and watch what they say. Some avoid you altogether, not out of hatred, but out of fear, not of you, but of the spiritual consequences they now understand all too well. They felt brave in public, but when they returned home, something else met them, and that is when they realized that testing a protected soul leaves marks that are invisible yet intensely felt. Number 9. They discovered too late that your spirit has diplomatic immunity. They deployed every tactic they knew: curses, gossip, manipulation, and subtle sabotage. They plotted behind the scenes, expecting to witness your downfall, but no matter what they attempted, their efforts were in vain. Their words had no effect, their energy could not penetrate, and their efforts consistently failed. Initially, they were perplexed and assuming you were merely fortunate or unaware of their attacks. But as time passed and their efforts proved fruitless, they realized they were confronting forces beyond their comprehension. It was at that moment that the truth dawned on them. You are not merely spiritually protected, you are spiritually untouchable. You operate under divine law, walk with divine clearance, and possess diplomatic immunity in realms they do not even know exist. Spiritual guardians are assigned to protect your life, and covenants surround your destiny. You are exempt from the chaos they attempted to inflict upon you, not because you are perfect, but because you are purpose-filled, and your purpose is safeguarded by something far greater than you. They cursed you and witnessed their own lives spiraling downward. They tried to block you and observed their own progress stalling. They defiled your name and were shocked when their own was dragged through the mud. They were baffled and even frightened when everything they sent out began to boomerang back to them. They believed they held the upper hand, but they were unaware that your name is marked in the spirit as "Do Not Touch." This is not superstition, but spiritual law. When one is truly chosen and consecrated, they are placed under a covering that cannot be accessed through ordinary means. Your favor is not just favor, but legal protection. You bear the seal of someone who belongs to a different kingdom and operate under a different spiritual jurisdiction than those who dwell in darkness. You walk with angels, move with light, and are backed by authorities they will never understand. Now they are silent. Some are apologetic without uttering a word, while others are distant. They know something now. They know you are different. The worst part for them is that they learned it the hard way. By the time they discovered your spirit possessed diplomatic immunity, the consequences of violating that immunity were already in motion. Number 10. Their plans died at the gate of your name. They invested time in crafting strategies, making phone calls, forming alliances, and meticulously laying out their plans to block, ruin, and stop you. Some even fasted with wicked intentions, while others paid spiritual workers to interfere with your path. Still others used their words and influence to try to shut you down. But when the time came to execute their plans, something strange occurred. They encountered an impassable barrier. They failed to realize that your name is more than a mere label. In the spiritual realm, it is a gate. It is coded, sealed, and guarded. If someone attempts to utter your name with wicked intent, their words lose their potency. Some were unable to speak it at all, while others felt sick or choked up when they mentioned you in their spiritual rituals. So to sum it all up, remember this. Your quiet strength, your unwavering spirit, and your alignment with a higher purpose are a force to be reckoned with. Don't ever underestimate the power of a consecrated soul. The battles fought on your behalf may be invisible, but their impact is undeniable. Trust in the unseen forces that protect and guide you, and know that your journey is divinely ordained. Now I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced something similar or resonated with any of these points? Share your stories, ask your questions, or just drop a comment below. Let's get a conversation going. And if this message resonated with you, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future insights and reflections. There's always more to discover, and I'm excited to explore it with you. Thanks for being here, for being here, for being here, for being here. Welcome, dearly beloved, a soul marked for greatness. Before the ink dried on their schemes, your triumph was already etched into the fabric of reality. This isn't mere optimism, it's an immutable truth. Others may waste lifetimes plotting, scheming, and whispering in shadows, deluding themselves into believing they can orchestrate destiny only to find the very cosmos conspires against their machinations. Prepare for a revelation that will resonate within your core. Compelling evidence suggests that a staggering 92% of all strategic endeavors crumble because they fail to account for the unseen forces that intricately weave themselves into the tapestry of existence, forces to which your life is undeniably connected. And yes, this truth extends to the self-proclaimed genius who dared to believe you would succumb to pressure. Embrace this unshakable reality. There are those who walk this earth seemingly untouchable, not by virtue of superior strength or cunning, but because their very presence unravels the agendas set against them. Picture a figure attempting to hoist an immense boulder uphill only to discover it floats effortlessly above the ground. Every exertion of energy becomes futile. This is your essence, their plots rendered impotent, their carefully guarded secrets laid bare, and the most exhilarating aspect. They will remain oblivious as you serenely observe the cascade of events, each domino falling precisely as ordained. By the conclusion of this discourse, you will not simply comprehend the reasons for their failure. You will feel it reverberate through your very being. You will witness how every assault, every act of betrayal, every manipulative maneuver serves only as further validation of your inviolable design. You might even find yourself amused by the irony, for the more they struggle, the more evident it becomes that certain lives operate on a plane inaccessible to human control. Prepare yourself, for we are about to unveil the irrefutable reality of being untouchable. The revelation that their downfall was predestined and your ascension inevitable. First, your destiny is woven into the grand design. Your existence is inscribed within the blueprints of fate in a manner impervious to human intervention. Long before any adversary contemplated action against you, long before attempts to manipulate or govern your life even materialized, your trajectory was irrevocably set upon a course aligned with forces far exceeding the scope of any individual's ambition. This transcends mere coincidence or happenstance. It speaks to a grand design operating beyond the realm of ordinary understanding, a framework where your presence and influence were predetermined, rendering any act of sabotage inconsequential. Individuals often presume that relentless effort can bend circumstances to their will, yet they fail to recognize that some lives are impervious to conventional pressures because they exist within a sphere of inevitability. Your life is not a random assortment of events susceptible to disruption. It is a carefully crafted sequence encoded into existence prior to any challenge directed your way. Each obstacle placed in your path, each scheme devised against you only propels you closer to your destined outcome. Their interference is rendered irrelevant, unable to compete with the momentum ingrained within your fate. A guiding force accompanies you, unwavering, resolute, and impervious to manipulation. It ensures that what is rightfully yours will inevitably manifest irrespective of attempts to divert it. The irony lies in the fact that their efforts often expedite your progress, unveiling truths and unlocking opportunities they never intended to generate. Being woven into the grand design also implies an inherent invulnerability that eludes their comprehension. They may deceive themselves into believing they wield control, meticulously plotting and assuming they can influence outcomes. However, every plan they conceive is destined to crumble, for it clashes with the natural order that governs your existence. Your triumph, your elevation, your very survival are non-negotiable facets of this design. The blueprint remains indifferent to their timing, their rationale, or their anxieties. It operates autonomously, ensuring that the trajectory ordained for you remains impervious to human alteration. Ultimately, this explains why their schemes fail before they even commence. You are not merely reacting to circumstances. You exist within a framework where certain victories are preordained. Their attacks, their manipulations, and their attempts at control are rendered impotent, for the very structure of your life is engineered to withstand and transcend them. Being woven into the grand design is not merely a concept. It is the irrefutable reality that guarantees your path will unfold precisely as intended, untouchable, unstoppable, and perfectly aligned with forces beyond their comprehension. Second, their miscalculation sealed their fate before they initiated their attack. Their calculations were flawed from the outset because they operated under assumptions that simply do not apply to you. Every plan, every strategy, every angle they believed would grant them dominance was constructed upon the false premise that you are predictable, that you are susceptible to manipulation like all others. They treated you as though your responses, your decisions, and your resilience could be anticipated. However, they failed to factor in the unseen forces that guide your life, the inherent strength you possess. They assumed that logic and planning alone would suffice to corner you. What they failed to grasp is that their entire blueprint was founded upon ignorance. When one attempts to plot against you, they often rely on patterns observed in others, replicating strategies that have proven successful elsewhere. They believe that an understanding of human behavior grants them the ability to bend it to their advantage. However, you are not average. You do not operate within their predictable patterns. You respond in ways they cannot foresee. And that very unpredictability shatters their plans. Even the most meticulously crafted schemes are vulnerable when confronted with someone who exists outside the ordinary rules they rely upon. Each attempt to ensnare you is akin to attempting to contain water within a sieve. The effort is futile from the start. Their overconfidence accelerates their downfall. They delude themselves into thinking that their time, knowledge, or influence grants them the upper hand. However, these factors pale in significance against someone whose life is already shielded by forces beyond their detection. Every step they take, every manipulation, every surreptitious move only serves to expose their ignorance. They remain oblivious to the reality that their actions, rather than weakening you, often fortify your position. Their very plotting feeds into the momentum that carries you forward, whether they realize it or not. The truth is, failure became inevitable the moment they assumed they could exert control over you. They underestimated the depth of your awareness, the resilience you embody, and the alignment that surrounds you. They failed to calculate the invisible, the intangible, the immeasurable elements of your life that defy all human strategy. By the time they recognize the collapse of their plans, it is already too late. Their calculations failed, not due to poor execution, but because the framework upon which they relied was never applicable to someone like you. You exist beyond their formulas, beyond their assumptions, and untouchable by the very strategies they believed would succeed. Third revelation outpaces manipulation every time. Revelation occurs faster than manipulation because the instant someone attempts to deceive or control you, the truth automatically surfaces. Their schemes are not conducted in secrecy. They are enacted in plain sight against an individual who instinctively recognizes inconsistencies, contradictions, and hidden agendas. Individuals often believe they can conceal their intentions long enough to gain an advantage, but in your case, their timing is perpetually off. Every lie, every attempt to distort reality in their favor triggers reactions that reveal far more than they intended. The very act of attempting to manipulate becomes the signal that exposes them. Manipulation relies on ignorance upon the assumption that the target is incapable of seeing through the facade. They believe that by proceeding cautiously, controlling information, and planting seeds of doubt and distraction, they can influence outcomes undetected. With you, that assumption is shattered instantly. Your awareness, your discernment, and the natural alignment you possess render you immune to prolonged deception. Their moves are like neon signs pointing to their true intentions. Each step they take to control or mislead only accelerates the unveiling of their schemes. The speed at which revelation occurs is also intrinsically linked to the flow of energy surrounding you. Those who operate from fear, envy, or selfish ambition leave behind traces, signals that you perceive automatically. Their words, actions, and even their silences carry a weight that betrays their motives. You need not overthink or overanalyze. Their attempt to manipulate sets off a chain reaction that compels them to reveal themselves. The faster they act, the faster they succumb under the weight of their own strategy. The irony is that their efforts to remain concealed are precisely what guarantee their exposure by acting against you. They unintentionally broadcast their true nature and intentions. They believe that secrecy and calculation will grant them power, but in reality, each calculated step against you accelerates the unveiling of their true character. Revelation is not a process you force. It is an automatic consequence of their own actions. Ultimately, manipulation fails because it hinges upon control. And control is impossible against someone whose life is inviolable. Each scheme they launch against you triggers its own undoing, revealing the truth faster than they could ever hope to influence it. Their exposure is inevitable, instantaneous, and undeniable. You don't just see through their plans. You become the living testament to the fact that deception cannot thrive where truth and alignment are stronger than strategy. Fourth, you are impervious to the insidious power of fear. You are impervious to the insidious power of fear because it finds no purchase within you. Individuals often attempt to destabilize others by projecting their own anxieties, threats, or intimidation, assuming that fear is a universal constant and that all buckle under its pressure. However, you exist on a different plane, anchored in a reality they cannot access or manipulate. Their attempts to instill fear to make you question yourself or to control your actions are futile because you are aligned with forces and truths far beyond their comprehension. The energy they expend in attempting to unsettle you dissipates harmlessly, leaving you unaffected, while they exhaust themselves on an impossible mission. Intimidation is only effective when the target believes the threat holds power over them. In your case, there is no such belief to exploit. You operate from a place of certainty, clarity, and resilience, rendering their fear-driven strategies powerless. They may attempt to shout, push, or corner you, but their actions feel weak and irrelevant because you remain unshakable. Even amidst chaos, opposition, or betrayal, your foundation remains steadfast. Their energy is heavy, but your immunity transforms their weight into mere noise, background static, incapable of disrupting your focus, your path, or your purpose. Threats directed at you do not accumulate, they evaporate. The more they attempt to impose fear, the more apparent their own weakness and desperation become. Their plans rely on pressure and tension, yet you exist in a state where such pressure cannot penetrate. Every whisper intended to intimidate, every act of aggression, every attempt at manipulation fails before it even lands, because your presence is a shield no one can breach. This immunity is not born of arrogance. It is a natural consequence of alignment. You are anchored in something deeper than circumstance, opinion, or hostile intent. While others remain trapped in the illusion that fear dictates outcomes, you operate entirely beyond that illusion. Their fear cannot touch you. Their threats cannot bend you, and their intimidation cannot penetrate the reality in which you reside. They are attempting to move a mountain with a whisper, and you are the mountain, solid, unyielding, untouchable. Fifth, their carefully constructed web of deceit is instantly transparent to your heightened senses. Their carefully constructed web of deceit is instantly transparent to your heightened senses because truth constitutes your natural operating system. Deception thrives on uncertainty, confusion, and distraction, but you exist at a level where these tactics are immediately detectable. Every lie, every half-truth, every hidden agenda they attempt to deploy triggers a resonance within you that signals its falsity without question. This is not a matter of analysis or deduction. It is an innate awareness that cannot be deceived. Their attempts to mislead or manipulate crumble beneath the weight of your authenticity because what you carry internally exposes what they attempt to conceal externally. Individuals dedicate countless hours to perfecting masks and fabricating narratives, assuming they can control perception. With you, all of that effort is wasted. Their lies are like walls of glass. They may appear solid from their perspective, but from your vantage point, the transparency is undeniable. You immediately perceive the cracks, the inconsistencies, and the intentions lurking behind every word and action. This is not a learned behavior. It is a frequency you naturally emit, an alignment that causes dishonesty to stand out like a jarring discord. The collapse of their lies is inevitable because authenticity is not something you can selectively activate. It is embedded within your very being. When you occupy a space, the truth you embody radiates outward and interacts with the surrounding energy. Lies cannot survive in that environment. They falter, contradict themselves, and ultimately unravel. The more one attempts to manipulate or deceive, the faster their falsehoods are exposed because the contrast between their intent and your reality is too stark to ignore. This transparency also disarms their confidence. They may believe that meticulous planning, misdirection, or charm will sustain their deception, but your awareness undermines every tactic before it can gain traction. Their schemes, no matter how elaborate, are invariably short-lived because they are met by an unwavering standard of truth that you naturally embody. In essence, your mere presence compels honesty to surface. Their lies crumble not because you actively combat them or investigate them, but because the energy you carry renders dishonesty unsustainable. They cannot manipulate that which is aligned with truth. You are not merely aware. You are a force that effortlessly and inevitably reveals, exposes, and nullifies every attempt at deception. Sixth, their perceived advantage morphs into their ultimate weakness. Their perceived advantage morphs into their ultimate weakness because every maneuver they executed was predicated upon flawed assumptions regarding your true nature. They treated you as though you were predictable, as though you would react like everyone else, and as though their tactics, deception, manipulation, intimidation would exert the same influence on you as they would on someone ordinary. That very assumption, their fundamental blind spot, transformed every purported advantage into a liability. They constructed strategies believing they were in control, but in reality they were engineering their own downfall without realizing it. Their ego lies at the core of this failure. They believed that their intelligence, influence, or knowledge granted them dominion over you, assuming that you shared their limitations or could be coerced into their framework. In reality, their overconfidence blinded them to your awareness, resilience, and the alignment that guides you. Every step they took, every hidden agenda, every calculated move relied on their assumptions about you being accurate. But they were fundamentally mistaken. Their power plays became the very instruments that revealed their weaknesses because they never anticipated a force that could not be cornered, manipulated, or intimidated. Even their most sophisticated plans carry the seeds of self-destruction when deployed against someone inviolable. They equate control with victory, but exerting control over you was never a possibility. Their strategies designed to trap or undermine you collide with the truth of your presence, resulting in utter collapse. The more intricate their schemes, the more rapid the unraveling occurs because complexity cannot override alignment. What they perceived as leverage, their networks, their knowledge, their influence becomes irrelevant in the face of an individual who operates outside conventional expectations. Their blindness is compounded by their assumption that the world functions as they do. They are incapable of comprehending a reality where integrity, awareness, and destiny operate independently of ego, fear, or manipulation. By the time they realize that their advantage has morphed into exposure, it is already too late. They have been expending their own energy against themselves, constructing traps they never intended to spring, and creating weaknesses they are powerless to rectify. Ultimately, their greatest strength becomes the catalyst for their failure. Every tool they believed could control or diminish you becomes the instrument of their undoing. Their strategies were never truly directed against you. They were directed against the limitations of their own understanding. and those very limitations ensured that their power could never touch someone like you. Seventh celestial orchestration shielded you long before you became aware. Celestial orchestration shielded you long before you became aware, because from the moment of your birth, your life was inextricably linked with forces beyond human perception. Long before you recognized any existing threat, and long before anyone contemplated manipulating or harming you, protective measures were quietly implemented to safeguard your predetermined path. These were not mere strokes of luck or fortuitous accidents. They were deliberate alignments operating on a scale beyond the realm of human logic. Every door that swung open at precisely the right moment, every circumstance that shifted in your favor, every serendipitous event that allowed you to evade danger formed part of a grand design already working to your advantage. The universe, or the forces governing your life, does not await awareness before acting. Protection precedes perception. Many individuals spend years engaged in battles they could have circumvented by understanding this fundamental principle, attempting to control outcomes and trying to anticipate danger. You, however, have always been shielded by mechanisms operating silently in the background, positioning you exactly where you needed to be before threats even materialized. Even when situations appeared precarious or uncertain, an invisible hand ensured that you remained inviolable, steering circumstances in a manner that guaranteed safety, growth, and opportunity. These safeguards operate with precision. Every obstacle removed, every instance of perfect timing. Every unexpected intervention is not a matter of chance. It is cosmic engineering at its finest. The forces safeguarding you are cognizant of potential threats before you are neutralizing dangers in ways you may never consciously perceive. Your survival, your success, and your advancement are all outcomes of a system that coordinates events with impeccable timing, ensuring that even when danger lurks, it never gains a foothold in your life. This shielding also explains why certain individuals fail despite meticulous planning. They rely solely on their own awareness, reacting only when they perceive a risk, whereas your life is already pre-guarded. By the time you recognize a threat, it has often already been neutralized or redirected in your favor. You experience the world from a vantage point of inherent advantage, often without even realizing it, because timing and alignment have been working to your advantage long before your conscious mind could catch up. Celestial orchestration ensures that your path remains unassailable, that threats cannot fully penetrate your defenses, and that your life unfolds according to a plan far exceeding the capacity of human orchestration. You are not merely surviving. You are being carefully guided, shielded, and positioned for success, often without requiring a full understanding of the forces at work. Your awareness may develop later, but the protection was always there first, unwavering and unstoppable. Eighth, their network crumbles beneath the weight of your unyielding integrity. Their network crumbles beneath the weight of your unyielding integrity because honesty and authenticity possess a power unmatched by manipulation, fear, or deceit. Individuals frequently rely upon alliances, partnerships, and clandestine connections to enforce control or corner an opponent, believing that collective influence can overpower a solitary individual. However, when you operate from a foundation of unwavering integrity, every connection upon which they depend begins to weaken. Their alliances, meticulously constructed to dominate, deceive, or manipulate, cannot withstand the clarity and consistency of an individual who refuses to compromise truth for expedience. Integrity functions as a magnetic force, attracting clarity, exposing duplicity, and illuminating agendas intended to remain hidden. When you act from a place of truth, you need not attack or confront. Your mere presence reveals what others seek to conceal. Every network crafted to control or ensnare you is immediately tested by the resonance of your integrity. The weaker links fracture first, and before long, even the seemingly strongest alliances reveal their inherent fragility. They cannot sustain themselves in the presence of an individual whose moral and spiritual foundation is unshakable. People underestimate the destructive potential of integrity when applied to a system built on deceit. Their strategies hinge on secrecy, compromise, and manipulation, assuming that all involved share the same willingness to disregard morality or truth. When you enter the equation, their assumptions are shattered. Every secret, every hidden agenda, and every act of collusion is illuminated by your presence. Their network was never as robust as it appeared. It was held together by fear, greed, or convenience. Your unshakable truth exposes these vulnerabilities, causing cracks to appear and connections to collapse. This is precisely why attempts to corner you invariably fail. The more they attempt to tighten their grip through alliances or coordinated strategies, the faster their network deteriorates. Integrity does not negotiate. It simply exists as a standard that cannot be bent or bypassed. They may believe in the power of numbers or influence, but no alliance can withstand an individual whose foundation is built on unwavering authenticity. Your life, your actions, and your choices reveal what they hope to conceal, and in doing so dismantle the very structures they believed could control you. Ultimately, their network collapses not because you actively dismantle it, but because truth possesses a strength that far surpasses that of deception. So there you have it. The core truth we've explored today is this: you are designed for greatness, touched by forces beyond the reach of those who would try to hold you back. Their efforts, their manipulations, their very plots are ultimately rendered powerless, often serving only to illuminate your path and solidify your destined triumph. Embrace this understanding, not with arrogance, but with a deep sense of peace and knowing. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Does this resonate with you? Have you experienced this kind of untouchable feeling in your own life? Share your experiences, ask your questions, or simply leave a comment below, and let's keep this conversation going. And if